Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name's John Hitchens and I'm working with Element Connected Technologies. In this webinar, I want to talk to you about something that we believe is genuinely new to the UK market to benefit manufacturers, and it's the ability to access NRTL HazLoc Certification support without leaving the UK. Before we get into the detail, I want to be clear about who this session is for. This is not an introduction to NRTL or to HazLoc regulations themselves. You're experienced manufacturers, you know what NRTL North American certification is, you've been through it and you understand what is typically involved. What we're here to discuss today is how, specifically a different way of engaging with the process that we think can make a real difference to your projects going forward. So if you've got certification projects ongoing, or teams that are spending too much time managing the certification process itself rather than designing products, then this is for you. So let's get started. What we're going to focus on today is delivery. That is the mechanism through which the certification assessment, testing and engineering engagement actually happens. We're going to look at how the traditional model works and where Element's new capability fits in, and then some practical examples where a UK-based delivery model could make the big difference to your program. We're not here to tell you there's a problem with how you're doing things today. We're here to say there is a new, fully UK-based alternative, and it's worth understanding whether that alternative suits your business. Let's start with where things stand today. The NRTL HazLoc requirements are, as many of you will know, very well established and largely stable. The regulatory framework of OSHA's NRTL program and the applicable UL and CSA standards haven't changed. You can plan around it, you can try and build it into your product development cycles and timelines. And many UK manufacturers have done that. They've established their NRTL approvals, they're successfully selling into the US and Canadian markets, and they have a functioning relationship with the certification body and with the process itself. But the challenge is becoming increasingly less about understanding the technical requirements and more about managing the process, the certification process, efficiently. As product portfolios get more and more complicated and development timelines are tightening and engineering teams are asked to do more with less resources, the friction and the delays caused by the certification process become more of a problem. The question we hear frequently from UK manufacturers is, how do we do this without it taking forever? And that's the conversation we're going to have today. The traditional NRTL HazLoc certification model has a clear structure as to how it works, so I'll summarise it very quickly. The certification assessment and project is broken into two discrete parts, the ORDLOC and the HazLoc approvals. Assessment is typically led from the US, with dialogue flowing between the manufacturer's UK team and the certification body's US-based engineers. Testing could happen in the UK or the US, maybe it's going through a UK-based notified body or third party, and there are often multiple handoffs between organisations, teams, engineers and even systems. My experience of working in manufacturing was that the ORDLOC assessment was completely separate to the HazLoc and not necessarily done in the same office or in the same country as the HazLoc assessment, and this can result in a pretty lengthy and disjointed process, as the manufacturer just wants to deal with one point of contact and see some form of linear progression, especially when you add in different time zones, national holidays, and other bits that just mean emails back and forth take much longer than they should. A technical clarification that could be resolved in a 30-minute phone call can become a 2-week or longer email chain. And when you are at certain points in the program where momentum really matters, like test plan approval, sample approval, test results, and any responses to the assessment queries, that lag caused by communication can have a real effect on the schedule. This model is the norm though, and continues to be. It's very proven, it's accepted, and it is entirely fit for purpose and safe. But we do hear reports of projects taking 1 or more years, which is a real issue if you have planned product launches. So we're not saying that the model is broken, we're just suggesting that if there's an alternative that removes that comms friction without changing the model, then it's worth knowing about. So what is Element offering? In short, Element's offering a full NRTL HazLoc certification delivered from the UK. Element is an OSHA recognised NRTL. That means it's authorised to assess products against UL and CSA standards and issue certification that is fully accepted for the US and Canadian markets. This is not a partnership arrangement, it's not a referral service to a US body, and it's not a workaround. It's a direct NRTL certification delivered by UK engineers. And what does that mean in practice? The Element assessment engineers are based in the UK. When you pick up the phone or send a technical question, you're talking to someone in your time zone who understands the UK manufacturing environment and who can often give you a response there and then. If you have pre-submission discussions or queries, evaluation questions, all of that happens in the UK. Our testing capability for HazLoc evaluation is also UK based, which means you don't need to ship a product across the Atlantic for testing. You're working with a single organisation for assessment and testing. That simplifies the logistics and reduces the coordination that comes with managing multiple parties. And critically, this sits within Element's global infrastructure, and we have the reach, the systems and the recognition to deliver against NRTL requirements fully and credibly. There's no other organisation in the UK that we know of that can offer this service. It is new and it is designed to solve that long-standing problem. So what does this mean in practice? The first thing it changes is when you get technical input. When your certification partner is accessible during your working hours, it becomes realistic to bring them in earlier, in the earlier stages of development. A conversation about the enclosure design or the temperature classification in week 8 of a program is a lot more valuable than having that conversation in week 28, when the changes are more expensive and timelines are already tight. Early engagement with your certification partner means that HazLoc requirements shaping the design rather than being an afterthought. The second benefit is speed. When you and your certification engineer are again in the same time zone, you can move through review cycles and iterations in days rather than weeks. That isn't a small thing on a program where you have a committed launch date. Thirdly, and this is huge for manufacturers who have global or multiple approvals, a UK-based NRTL partner makes it practical to align your ATEX, IECEx and NRTL activities rather than running those programs in parallel or one after the other with different organisations in different countries. It means you can coordinate them from a single point of contact in the UK. The testing can overlap, the documentation can overlap, and the conversations are happening in the same room. This is a more integrated and much more efficient certification project, not because the rules have changed, but because the way you're working through the process has become a lot less fragmented. And what hasn't changed? So one thing to be really clear about is that nothing about OSHA's requirements have changed. Nothing about what NRTL certification means or what it requires is changing. The standards that you certify to, whether that's UL 60079 series, UL 2225, 1203, the CSA equivalents, they're all the same standards applied with the same level of scrutiny by NRTL aware engineers. The follow-up services and the audits remain mandatory. Production monitoring and the obligations that come with holding NRTL certification haven't changed. All of it continues exactly as normal. Element's NRTL program operates in full compliance with OSHA's NRTL requirements. The markings on your product, the compliance documentation, the evidence that you give to customers and to regulators are identical to what you would receive from any other NRTL. We don't want to suggest this is a simple or light path to certification. It's not. The level of certification is the same. What's different is the experience of getting there. So the accessibility, the responsiveness, and the ability to work within your own time zones. It's not a shortcut, it's a different route to the same destination. Let's use a scenario that many of you will recognize. You have an existing certified product or product family, certified through the traditional model. It has the NRTL mark applied, customers are already being supplied, but you want to extend that product family, a new enclosure size, a new material, or a variant for a specific customer application. Now that doesn't need to take 12 months or more. In the traditional model, this means going back to a US-based certification body, initiating a new or amended at least application, and managing that process across the time zones. For a straightforward variant, technical changes might be very modest, but the process and the overhead is going to be the same. With a UK-based NRTL, the conversation about what that extension requires can start before you finalise the design. Your UK engineering team and UK assessment engineers can work through the construction evaluation, identify any gaps, and move into formal assessment with the documentation already well developed. For manufacturers managing large or growing product ranges and families, this kind of accessible technical engagement has a massive benefit. Each variation or extension becomes more predictable, and learning from previous certifications is retained within that relationship. It's a scenario where, again, the time zone advantage is really tangible, and where the ability to align assessment activity with your engineering calendar rather than around somebody else's makes a big difference. The second scenario we have is one we see increasingly often among UK manufacturers accessing multiple markets. They need to run ATEX or UKEX and their IECEx alongside NRTL certification, often for the same product. In the traditional model, this typically means engaging 2 or more separate certification bodies, one for the European and IECEx schemes, one for the North American scheme. Each has their own processes, their own timelines, and often completely different test requirements. Manufacturers end up managing parallel work streams that have significant overlap but are treated as entirely separate projects. Element holds approvals across ATEX, IECEx, UKEX and NRTL, and that means we can assess your product against all of those schemes from a single point of engagement in the UK. The practical benefit is obvious. Testing done for IECEx or ATEX can often be shared with or aligned to NRTL assessment requirements. Documentation that supports one scheme can be structured to support the other, and rather than managing 3 certification relationships, you have a single technical conversation that covers your entire market access. For manufacturers with a global reach and a global strategy, this is a big improvement. It can represent a significant reduction in both program time and the management that your certification team or engineering team carries. The third scenario, and probably the most stressful one in any certification project, is the late design change. And I know these a little bit too well. So you can be deep into the certification project, the assessment's underway, or even close to completion, and something happens. Maybe a material supplier goes bust. That's happened to me. Or an engineering decision gets revisited under commercial pressures or a meeting with the customer, and the design is different to what was submitted in the first place. In this situation, you need fast, clear, technical assistance. Does this change affect the certification scope? Does it require a full formal construction change? Can it be assessed quickly, or does it require a full re-evaluation? Getting that wrong or getting an answer back slowly can have serious consequences. But again, when you're all based in the UK, available during the same working hours, and familiar with your product and program, that conversation happens in hours rather than days. The assessment engineer can review the change and give you a clear position on the implications, and if required, they can initiate an appropriate formal process, and that can happen without delay. The certification rules don't change in this scenario. It's just another example of how that speed and understanding your position can help you to move. In a late stage program, late part of a project, that responsiveness is often the difference between a minor delay and a really significant one. Before we look at the next steps, I've got 3 questions that might help you to assess whether the UK-based element model is going to be relevant or helpful to your business. You don't need to answer them now, but they're worth considering. The first question is, where do delays typically occur in your NRTL certification projects today? If the answer is in the technical back and forth, so when you're waiting for responses, waiting for assessment feedback, waiting for clarification on your queries, then having that UK-based partner can address that directly. The second question is, how often does your engineering team need to interact with the overseas certification contacts? If that's a regular part of your process and you have a lot of back and forth, and if those interactions are happening too slowly or outside your core working hours, the total cost of that in waiting time, in scheduling, and in slowed down decision making is probably higher than it is on any other certification scheme, but because it's NRTL, it's just known as the norm. The third question is, how early in your development does HazLoc input currently arrive? So when do you start to consider the HazLoc requirements? If the honest answer is later than it should, that's often a symptom of a process that makes that early involvement difficult or impractical. Typically, you might find manufacturers do ATEX and IECEx first to get it out of the way, and because it's generally a lot quicker and a lot more straightforward, and then they'll tackle the NRTL project later on, which takes longer. The whole process takes a long time, and you're restricted from launching that global product. A more accessible certification relationship would change that dynamic. These questions aren't designed to point you towards a particular path. They're genuinely questions to help guide you to consider whether the element offering aligns with your situation. So what do manufacturers who engage with element NRTL service typically tell us they're looking for? Earlier technical input is consistently the most common answer. It's the ability to have a productive conversation about the certification requirements while there's still time left to act. Not after the design is locked, not when the timeline is already behind and under pressure, but when it can genuinely influence the outcome positively. The second is better coordination across the certification schemes. For manufacturers who hold multiple international approvals, the difficulty of managing those schemes separately has a real cost. The appeal of a single body partner who can span ATEX, IECEx, UKEX and NRTL is significant, not because it removes anything from the regulations or how safe the product is, but because it removes complexity from the project management itself. Third is communication, not in the sense of being friendly, although that's something that we all aim to be, but in the sense of clarity and accessibility. Knowing that when you have a question, you can get a clear answer from somebody who understands your project, your product in your time zone without it becoming a project in itself. And underpinning all of that is the desire to reduce complexity. Certification is a necessary part of what you do. It shouldn't consume more of your team's capacity than it should. Element's UK-based NRTL capability is designed to make the process as efficient as the regulations allow. A brief word about Element for those who might be less familiar. Element Materials Technology is a global testing, inspection and certification organisation with facilities and expertise across multiple sectors and geographies. In the UK, Element has a substantial engineering and testing presence. This isn't a recently assembled capability, it's part of a well-established and well-resourced organisation. Across HazLoc and the related certification landscape, Element's experience covers ATEX, IECEx, UKEX and now NRTL. That breadth is part of what makes the coordinated approach I've talked about, running multiple schemes through a single partner, maybe a single project, a reality rather than a dream. We work with manufacturers across a range of industries and product types, and we understand the pressures that come with managing complex certification programs alongside demanding development and commercial schedules. The Element team will be happy to talk you through your specific situation in more detail. So let me bring the key points together. The regulatory requirements for NRTL HazLoc certification hasn't changed. If you hold certifications today, what's required of you and what your certification means is identical to what it has always been. The traditional delivery model, which is US-led assessment and overseas engineering engagement, remains a valid and the typically used approach. We're not suggesting that there's anything wrong with it. What Element offers now is a UK-based alternative. NRTL assessment and certification delivered by UK engineers in UK working hours with UK-based testing support. It gives you the ability to align ATEX, IECEx and UKEX with NRTL from a single point of contact. Whether that's the right model for your project depends on your specific situation. The structure of your product portfolio and the markets you serve and the way your engineering team works will dictate how you work and where the friction in your current process sits. What we're confident of is, for a meaningful number of UK manufacturers, this capability changes what's possible. And until now, it just simply wasn't available from within the UK. Thanks for your time today. If any of what we've covered resonates with your situation, whether it's a specific program you're managing, a certification project coming up in the next 12 months, or simply a desire to understand what this could mean for your business, we would welcome the conversation. The best starting point is a short technical discussion with one of the HazLoc engineers. There's no obligation, and the aim is simply understand your project and tell you honestly whether a UK-based service would make a difference to you or not. Thanks again, and we look forward to speaking with you.